Canadian government's current primary responsibility is not to the Canadian field, but to the bottom line of Brookfield Asset Management. Our foreign and domestic policy are being run by a man who spent his entire career in service of the WF Davos and Brookfield Asset Management. And if you look at policy after policy after policy since Mark Carney has been installed as Prime Minister of Canada, the only way it makes sense is when you look at it through the lens of Brookfield Asset Management. I'm going to give you a few examples. Right now, 75% of the Canadian people say we have too much immigration. We can't handle any more. 8 million immigrants in the past decade. Enough is enough. What does Carney do? Two major announcements this week. A, he says that we're going to have another 1 million immigrants in total into the year in 2025. B, he says no longer will the government of Canada be tracking the immigration numbers. Sure, that makes no sense. The Canadian people are overwhelmingly against it. 3 and 4 is about as large a consensus as you're going to get in Canadian politics. Brookfield Asset Management owns $37 billion worth of real estate in Canada. What is one of the direct impacts of mass immigration on Canadian society? It continues to pump real estate prices higher and higher and higher. Basic economics, supply and demand. Doesn't take a rocket science to figure out. You flood a country with citizens, there's going to be much more demand for those real estate assets. In the past decade alone, Brookfield's assets in Canada have nearly doubled in value. And one of Carney's primary responsibilities is to continue to pump those numbers up. So the reason we're seeing another 1 million immigrants into the country in 2025, look no further than Brookfield Asset Management, where Carney oversaw, a large part of his job as vice chair was overseeing the real estate assets. And here in Canada, $37 billion worth of assets he's now overseeing. Prefab housing. Carney has been incredibly slow on the trigger. He talked a big game about all these major projects that we were going to get going once he got elected Prime Minister. But now that he's actually in office, barely anything is happening. One of the few major announcements that Carney, however, has made is that the Canadian government will be spending $25 billion on so-called prefab homes. Now, if you've looked into these prefab homes, I don't know very many Canadians that want to live in them. They're not particularly nice homes. I'm not mocking anybody who lives in them. I mean, it's a place to live. It's fine. But I don't think it's the Canadian dream exactly. And guess what? Carney's Brookfield just signed a deal with a company. They took over a company named Modular. Guess what they do? They build prefab homes. So the exact same time as Carney announces one of his few major projects, he's actually lifted a finger to get off the ground. $25 billion investment in prefab homes. What a coincidence that Brookfield just bought out Modular. Wow, what are the odds of that? Another one, we're having forest fires all over the place right now. And I won't bore you with the details, but when they deforest these heavily treed areas, if you want to avoid forest fires, you need to leave a percentage of the trees around, because that way there's enough precipitation in the ground. You have to leave a small percentage of the trees in the ground. But what that does is it costs a little bit more money. You have to be a little more careful, the people who are doing the deforesting. So they're not doing it in Canada. They're not doing it in BC where they're seeing the wildfires. They're not doing it on the East Coast because it's more costly, the company that's doing it. Guess who does all that deforestation? I kid you not, it's Brookfield. It would cost Brookfield. It's insane. So our deforestation policy, a lot of the wildfires we're seeing are not due to climate change, as virtue signaling Carney would have you think. No, it's due to our deforestation practices in Canada that Brookfield are overseeing. So Brookfield's pocketbooks are getting lined while Canadians are dealing with more forest fires because of their unsafe practice. And then it gets even better with the deforestation in Brookfield. What does Brookfield do after they've done that deforesting? Rather than send it to a lumber yard in Canada where we can actually provide Canadians with good jobs, what do? They send it overseas. They send it to China. They send it to Japan because it's better for Brookfield's bottom line. The level of insanity that we're seeing right now is truly stunning. It's truly stunning to see a government so blatantly and out in the open working in the best interest of a massive $1 trillion private corporation. And I see nobody in the Canadian media talking about any of these hundreds of conflicts of interest that Carney has. 103 companies he's invested in, as well as at least 10 investments still maintained in Brookfield. And CBC, CTV, I'm not even seeing a whisper about it. It's really shocking. Carney was actually, when you look into the process, was much more installed than he was elected Prime Minister of Canada. Only 400,000 people voted in the Liberal election, and the only candidate who's critical of Carney whatsoever was kicked out, Ruby Dalla. So 400,000 people voted in a country of 41 million, and then there were a lot of irregularities in the actual general election. But if you as a Canadian are shaking your head and say, what's going on with our immigration process? Like, why are we allowing another million and not letting the Canadian people know what's going on in the process? What's going on with all these forest fires all over the place? What's going on with these prefab housing, one of the few initiatives we got off the ground? Look no further than what is best for Brookfield, because the once great country of Canada is now being run by a creepy man named Mark Carney, who's looking out for the best interests of Brookfield, not your best interest. I'm setting up rallies on Parliament Hill because patriotic Canadians need to get out and hit the streets. We need to get out and hit the streets. Bitching about it online, spreading awareness is not going to do enough. Clearly, they don't give a damn about what the polling numbers are. So we actually have to physically hit the streets. If you're interested in attending and in the Ottawa area, I'm going to be sending out more details over the next couple of weeks. But tentatively, I've put in applications for Saturday, September 13th and Saturday, September 27th. If you're unable to make it but would like to support the cause, hit the link in my bio, donate. All donations are going to go towards FOI requests and promoting this thing all throughout Ottawa. There's also merch. I have some great gear up for sale. Subscribe to my Substack. Please like, share the video, but patriotic Canadians need to stand up and say enough is enough to this crooked coward who's looking out for his bottom line, not the best interest of the Canadian people.